Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and today I'm going to be giving you my final picks for the NBA All-Star Game in 2023. The starters are going to be announced today as you're seeing this video, and tomorrow as I'm recording this video, so I thought there was no better time than to give you my final picks, and some of these could change in about a week or so when the reserves are actually announced, but in this moment, this is who I've got. We're going to start off with the Western Conference, move over to the East, and then I'll also give you snubs after each of the conferences, and I can guarantee you there's some pretty notable snubs because it really feels like the NBA is more stacked with talent than ever before. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these videos. And let's go ahead and get right into it. Beginning with the Western Conference backcourt starters, I've got Luka Doncic and I've got Steph Curry. Luka is basically a lock at this point, putting up MVP numbers as he has basically almost every single season since he's been in the league. He's going to consistently be a starter in the NBA All-Star Game up until he retires, or if there's just a year where he sits out due to injury. But Luka is an absolute lock in my opinion. He's putting up ridiculous numbers and is carrying what is a decent but not overly great Mavericks roster to being in competition for home court advantage in the Western Conference playoffs. Joining him in the backcourt, probably to the surprise of none of you, is Steph Curry. He's been amazing so far this season, while the Warriors themselves have been struggling. That's not at all due to Steph, who is still the best point guard in the NBA in my opinion. He's a monster shooting from deep, the best shooter of all time, of course. He's doing it incredibly efficiently as well, and his numbers still stand out even in a league at the moment where it feels like unreal, unprecedented numbers are basically the norm. Steph and Luka have been the best two guards in the Western Conference so far this season. They get my Western Conference starter spots. Then we move to the front court, where I first have LeBron James, who will very likely be the captain for the All-Star team itself. He's been amazing, and since he turned 38, it feels like he's only getting better and better, continuing to put up unprecedented numbers for somebody with this much mileage of this age. But it really feels like LeBron James could play until he's like 50 and still be one of the top players in the league. He's carrying the Lakers on a night in, night out basis, and Anthony Davis will soon be back for support dealing with some injuries, but in the meanwhile, LeBron has done his best to keep the Lakers afloat, and while they are, not in the play-in tournament at the moment with how close everything is in the Western Conference, they're still in that conversation. Next up, I have probably the biggest lock out of anybody, and that is Nikola Jokic. He's my leader right now for MVP, probably having the best season of his career, which is wild to say for somebody who's currently the reigning back-to-back MVP, and he might end up three-peating by the time everything is said and done this season. Jamal Murray has still not been quite back to his usual self and missed some games. Same with Michael Porter Jr. However, it hasn't mattered. If Nikola Jokic is on this team, there's a pretty good chance the Nuggets are going to win. They're 17-3 in their last 20 games on top of the Western Conference, and they have shown no signs of slowing down whatsoever. Jokic is a lock to be a starter. And finally, in a bit more of a surprising pick than the rest of the guys, I have Domantas Sabonis. I wouldn't have imagined him being here as a starter when the season began, but the Kings right now are the 3 seed in the Western Conference, and Domas has been the biggest reason why. He's an elite playmaker at the big man position, a really solid scorer who's also stretching the floor better than ever before. He's one of the best rebounders in the league. He's playing defense at a decent enough level to help the Kings be beyond what many people thought they could be, although the defense has still struggled this season as a whole. But overall, Domas has been amazing. The Kings are shocking the world, and I think he's done enough and played more games than some of the other contenders for this spot to earn the final All-Star starter nod. Moving on to the bench, at the first guard position, I have Gilgeous-Alexander. As badly as I wanted to put him at the starter spot, I just think he's a little bit below Steph and Luka at this point in the season. I think there is an argument to be made, and as one of the biggest Thunder fans in the world, I will absolutely make that argument. But to be objective, I went ahead and put him on the bench, but he's an all-star lock nonetheless, regardless of if he is a starter or a bench player. He's putting up over 30 points per game, been really solid defensively too, a high-level playmaker. He can get to the rim at will. He can shoot from the mid-range at will. He's gone from a fringe all-star guy to a near borderline superstar at this point, and he's going to make his first all-star appearance this year, even if it should have been a couple of years ago. Next to him, we have Ja Morant, who's a walking human highlight reel. He's got the Grizzlies as one of the best teams in the Western Conference, an elite scorer inside, an elite playmaker, one of the most electric athletes in the history of the sport, to be honest. Ja Morant is just absolutely incredible, and I think him and Shea as the backup guards in the West is just unbelievable. First up off the bench for the Western Conference frontcourt, we have Anthony Davis, who before he got hurt was playing like a top 5 player in the NBA, one of the most dominant defenders in the league, an amazing scorer as well. He had the Lakers really seeming like they had an opportunity to click if they made a couple of deals, and if the Lakers managed to turn things around over the course of the season, he would end up being right in the conversation for DPOY and MVP. Of course, he did end up getting hurt, which I do think is what moves him down from a starter to a bench player, although I'm pretty sure the fan vote is going to get him that starter nod in the end of things. But overall, 80 when he has played has been phenomenal, and I hope when he returns we see that same level of dominance, because if so, the Lakers are going to get very scary. Next to him in the front court, we have Zion Zion Williamson, who, like Anthony Davis, if he didn't deal with injuries, probably would have been an all-star starter. However, he has missed a lot of time. I believe he only played one game over the course of the entirety of January, but like AD, when he has played, he's been a dominant force, reminding a lot of people why the 2019 draft was called the Zion Williamson draft. One of the most dominant interior forces in the league right now, despite being like 6'6", 6'7", somewhere around that range. He's a physical force too. He's got a lot of finesse. When he comes downhill, there's basically no stopping him. And when him and Brandon Ingram get healthy, the Pelicans are going to be one of the scariest teams in not just the West, but the NBA as a whole. Finally, off the bench, we have Lauri Markkanen, who before this season, I would have never guessed he would be an all-star guy at this point in his career. Coming over to Utah, he wasn't even like looked at that heavily as the premier piece of that Donovan Mitchell trade. It was like Colin Sexton, the draft picks, and then maybe Lauri Markkanen third. But he's completely flipped that on its head, becoming their franchise cornerstone for the time being. He's hyper efficient. He can grab boards. He's been clutch so far this season too. The biggest reason why the Utah Jazz have gone from potential bottom feeder to right in the thick of not just the play-in race, but the playoffs as well. Then we get to the Western Conference wildcards, which can go to any player regardless of position. And the first one I have is Devin Booker, another guy that has missed a lot of time due to injury, which is honestly kind of a theme over the course of the NBA this season. But once again, when D-Book played, he was dominant. He was carrying the Phoenix Suns on basically every level. There were some nights where they needed him to score 50 plus points to even have a chance of winning. Now they figured things out a little bit since then, and when Devin Booker does come back, I expect the Suns to look pretty good. He was an MVP candidate before he went down with injury, and I do expect him to be back pretty soon. I think he's being reevaluated right about now, so hopefully D-Book is back in time for the All-Star game because he's 100% deserving of making it onto this list. And the final wildcard spot does indeed go to Damian Lillard, and I know the Portland Trailblazers have been pretty disappointing as of late. They continuously drop more and more down the standings, but Dame has still been amazing. He still is putting up really great numbers, especially bouncing back from last season, where it seemed like the era of Damian Lillard being dominant might be over. That hasn't been the case. He hasn't been quite as good of a shooter as he typically is, but Dame is still playing really, really good hoops, and I expect him to make the All-Star game when it's all said and done. These are my 12 picks for the Western Conference All-Star team, and of course, as I'm sure a lot of you are typing angry comments, there are some pretty big snubs. The first one is De'Aaron Fox, who I would have loved to see get on this list. I just think the guard position in the Western Conference is a bit too stacked at this point. I don't think I can put him over any of those other guys, although if he does somehow make the team, I'd be super excited. I would love to see Fox get that recognition. I just think he's a little bit behind the others. Then you have Paul George, and the Clippers I do think will end up getting him on this list when the coaches make their decisions for the reserves, but I just think some of the other Western Conference frontcourt guys have been a bit better. Anthony Edwards, another example of the guard spot just being a bit too stacked. Aaron Gordon is a conversation that a lot of people are having because the Nuggets have been so good, mainly due to Nikola Jokic, but like I said, Jamal Murray's missed some time, same with Michael Porter Jr., and Aaron Gordon has stepped up in a big way for them, having the best year of his career. I just once again think there are some other more deserving guys. And finally, Jaren Jackson Jr., probably my defensive player of the year at this point, and with the Grizzlies playing so well, they may be deserving of 2 All-Stars on this team. I just don't think he's played enough games, and he's eventually going to be a casualty of the snubs list. Now let's head over to the Eastern Conference, and of course we're going to begin with the backcourt starters. The first guy I have is Donovan Mitchell. He's been the best guard in the East so far this season, having probably the best year of his career, and the Cavs look phenomenal because of it. The spotlight was really on him when he got to Cleveland to show out and say, hey, I can be the star somewhere outside of Utah, and he's doing exactly that. Been their best player, absolutely. It's been super fun to watch him. I mean, he had 71 points. It's a crime if he doesn't end up making the starters list, which I 100% think he will. Next to him in the backcourt, I have Jaylen Brown, who's having the best season of his career right now, and is a massive part of why the Celtics have been so successful and look poised to not just make it back to the finals, but are current NBA title favorites. JB is great on both sides of the ball, scoring like 27 points per game, while also helping lock up some of the opposing team's best scores. Jaylen Brown, I would have never fathomed him getting to this level that he's at now, but I'm super glad that he did, as he's become one of the best guards in not just the East, but the NBA as a whole. Now we get to the most controversial part of all these All-Star picks, the Eastern Conference frontcourt, because there are 4 guys that are very deserving and only 3 spots. The 4 names that I would love to put all of them on here are Kevin Durant, Joel Embiid, Jason Tatum, and Giannis Antetokounmpo. However, I had to pick 3 of them, and so one of them will be left off. I'm going to warn you now, and you can go ahead and give me angry comments below when I reveal who it is, and I'm just going to go for it. The first guy that I have in that Eastern Conference frontcourt is Kevin Durant. Before he went out with injury for this recent stretch, he was putting up the most efficient season of his career career, which is wild to say when you're talking about Kevin Durant, one of the best scorers in NBA history, but it's true. He was leading the Brooklyn Nets to a great record. They were continuously rising up the standings after having an abysmal start to the season that was filled with all sorts of drama. It didn't matter though, because Kevin Durant continued to carry them over that stretch. And when he comes back, the Brooklyn Nets are going to be bona fide contenders in the East, in large part due to the way that he continues to get better despite getting older and older. Next to KD in the front court and also battling for a captain spot with him, I have Giannis Antetokounmpo, the best player in the world at the moment. He's averaging over 30 points per game, an elite rebounder, an elite defender. I don't think I really have to explain to you why Giannis ends up on this list. The Bucks are one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference despite dealing with numerous injuries over the course of the season. Giannis is a big reason why, and I do think he will end up 100% being on the starters list when the list is announced later tonight. And for the final spot, I'm going to go ahead and pick Joel Embiid, who has been amazing this season, having the best year of his career alongside many of these other guys. He's averaging nearly 34 points per game, 10 rebounds, and almost 2 blocks. He's been one of the best offensive players in the league. There's basically no defense you can play that can stop Joel Embiid from probably getting a pretty efficient 30-piece. And defensively, he's been one of the best defenders in the league, has the Sixers as one of the top Ds in the entire NBA, and when he is on the court, they're the single best team in the league on that side of the ball. He's dealt with a bit of injury, so that is something that goes a bit against him, but overall, the way that Embiid is playing as the Sixers continue to rise up the standings, they're one of the hottest teams in the NBA right now. I think Embiid ends up as the third guy in the Eastern Conference front court. Of course, this does mean that Jason Tatum ends up on the bench, which almost feels criminal for me to say. I just think he's a little bit behind some of these other guys, but then again, when you consider the team's success with how good the Celtics have been, I think you can make an argument for any one of those guys to get left off in favor of the other three, and I'm not going to be mad. This is just the way I went, so go ahead and leave your angry comments below. But Tatum has still been amazing. He's still in the MVP race like those other three Eastern Conference front court guys. He's been an elite perimeter defender, averaging over 30 points per game, and has the Celtics poised to win the East once again. Sticking with the Eastern Conference front court reserves, we've got Bam Adebayo, who I still feel like is one of the single most underrated stars in the NBA. When people talk about the best and brightest young guys in the league, Bam hardly gets mentioned, despite the fact that he's right there in conversations for the third best center in the NBA. He's averaging over 20 points per game, dealing with a lot of those aggressiveness issues that me and many others had with him in the past. He's still one of the best defenders in the league too, and despite the Heat having numerous injuries to some of their best guys, and just being a pretty thin roster as a whole, Bam has been their best player so far this season in my opinion, and is leading them to right now one of the better records in the East. Rounding out the Eastern Conference front court, we have Pascal Siakam, who unlike the Raptors, who are way below expectations, he is far exceeding basically anybody's hopes for him this season. He's been amazing, regardless of the struggles Toronto themselves are having. It's not his fault, because he's having the best year of his career, building off of last year's All-NBA appearance and probable All-Star snub. He will 100% be on the team this year, or I'm going to be mad for him. Pascal is just an overall monster, and once again is someone in those star conversations that I feel like continues to fly under the radar for some of the more casual fans. Moving over to the Eastern Conference backcourt reserves, the first name is Kyrie Irving, and I did think about putting him there as a starter. I just went with Jaylen Brown. I feel like he was a bit more deserving, but Kyrie is very deserving in his own right. I 100% understand if you have him there instead. He's been doing a great job recently of carrying the Nets without Kevin Durant, putting up monster performances, been one of the best fourth quarter players as of recently. He's still one of the elite guards in the Eastern Conference, even if you sometimes forget about it, because he is playing next to KD. Next to Kyrie, we have Tyrese Halliburton, who's averaging 20 and 10. He's been amazing so far this season, truly having his breakout year, and the Pacers are incredibly better because of it. Many people, me included, thought they would be one of the bottom feeders in the East at this point, but because of his play, his hyper-efficient scoring, and his elite playmaking, they're still in the conversation to not just make the play-in tournament, but maybe even snag a playoff spot in general if they don't blow it up at the deadline. And you can really see his impact. Since he went out with injury, the Pacers basically fell apart, showing that he orchestrates everything they do. For my first Eastern Conference wildcard spot, I've got Julius Randle, who I 100% should be a lock for the All-Star game. He's made a huge bounce back from last season when he was really disappointing, and it's once again looking like the player we saw a couple years ago where he was an all-star, an all-NBA player. He got that big contract from the Knicks, and he looked like he could be a franchise cornerstone going forward. He's regained that form. He's scoring more efficiently. He's hitting his threes once again. He's a high-level rebounder. His playmaking is back up to the level we saw before, and some of that might be the addition of Jalen Brunson, who's helping take a bit of the pressure off of him. But regardless, Julius Randle deserves a lot of credit for bouncing back in such a big way and makes the All-Star game, in my opinion. And the final Eastern Conference wildcard spot does go to James Harden. He's been one of the best playmakers in the NBA so far, still a solid scorer. Although he isn't the scorer he once used to be, he's molded his game in a way that helps this team still be really successful. Once again, like I said, the Sixers have dealt with numerous injuries over the course of the year, and he stepped up in a big way when they've been missing some of their other guys. He's not going to drop those crazy 30-point triple-doubles anymore, but he can give you 15 assists on any given night while still scoring 20 points. And I think the way that he's helped keep the Sixers afloat deserves an all-star nod. Finally, this takes us to the Eastern Conference snubs. The first one is, of course, Jalen Brunson, who I do believe is pretty deserving of a spot, but it's just, once again, like the Western Conference, so stacked. And I think Randall's done a bit more to earn that nod from New York than Brunson has so far. You've also got Jrue Holiday, who is someone that I really, once again, wanted to put on this list because, like James Harden, as I mentioned, he's also stepped up big in the absence of some of the Bucks stars, but I just went with the beard slightly over him. Jimmy Butler is a name that it feels very wrong to not have on this list, and if I thought about it a bit more, I might have him on here eventually, but he has missed a good bit of time, and I do think that Bam Adebayo has been a bit better so far this season. You've got Trae Young too, who is having the numbers to be an all-star, but in terms of the overall impact, the shooting numbers being down, I think he just barely misses the cut. DeMar DeRozan is another player that really is deserving of being on this list. I just couldn't seem to make space for him. And finally, there's Darius Garland, who I do believe some talk as well as Paolo Banchero, who's been great so far as a rookie, and I do think deserves some of the hype he's getting to be an all-star in the East as a rookie, but overall, he's just going to miss the cut. And with that being said, those are my 2023 NBA All-Star Game picks. Go ahead and leave your comments down below, letting me know who I left off and why I'm an idiot for doing so. I'm sure a lot of you have already done that up to this point. I appreciate you watching. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these videos. Like I said, I know there were a lot of notable snubs. It's just so hard when there's so much talent in the league, and I've long been an advocate of expanding the All-Star rosters, so get mad at them, don't get mad at me. I appreciate y'all watching. I'll see y'all later. Real one, say it back.